Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. My guest today is Eric Kennedy. He's the founder of Recovery Vow. We're going to talk about when rock bottom actually becomes holy ground and redemption, and turning around after, having a really tough life, whether self-imposed or not. So welcome, Eric. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil your story. Obviously, you'd be better to tell it than I would. So what made you decide to work with people that are having, massive personal troubles in their life? I mean, what's your backstory? What happened to you?
Well, let's just go back to the last 3 days of my addiction journey. How about that? And that'll lead into the rock bottom. So the last 3 days were the just darkest times. And I really don't like sharing all of the gory stuff, but you have to hear people's rock bottom in order for them to be able to take a step forward in the right direction. And so before I could take the step forward in the right direction, I had to hit rock bottom. And those last 3 days were a suicide attempt, being alone. I lived in a mobile home out in nowhere, South Carolina. And I worked. It was a horrible job. But the morning of September 26th, I went before 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was able to get $60 worth of crack cocaine. And by this time I was smoking about $600 to $1,000 worth of crack a week. And you ask, well, how do you afford that? Well, as an addict, you'll figure it out. You figure out how to get what you want. And I was also drinking about a half a gallon a day. So I was drinking for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And on this particular morning, this was a Friday, if I'm not mistaken. It was a Friday. I had drank about a pint by 7:30, and I had enough liquid courage to go and ask the person that I got my drugs from. I said, what we would call a front. Hey, will you front me $60 until later on this afternoon? I'll go cut some grass somewhere or borrow some money, and I'll pay you back. So I showed up at his door, woke him up. I asked for that. And, if suicide and just being so pitiful that I didn't want to do life, I couldn't kill myself, Richard. I tried. I really tried. Wrote the note, wrote the whole funeral out, said goodbye to my children, apologized. And the first time I tried to do that, I took a bunch of pills. I woke up at MCG. So somebody found me and I got taken to the hospital. And then the second time, this was a very spiritual moment. It was almost like one of those moments of clarity. I had taken 3 bottles, like the smaller bottles, because I couldn't get a big one at a local grocery store. But I took 3 bottles of Tylenol PM one night when I was drinking. And I woke up the next day, like, I don't know if it was just I'm sure it was a God thing, really. But I mean, I expected to just not wake up. And so I woke up, still nothing changed, but it was just like, here's a chance, you got to take this chance. And I remember asking God in one of these dark times to just like, really, if you're something out there that I can really depend on, really count on, I just need you to show me what you have in store for me and just take this life from me. And, nothing ever happened, but that day something did happen. I went and got the $60 worth of crack, and I drank the pint, but I didn't feel anything. So I mean, it told me that it was going to take a lot more than $60 and a lot more than a pint to get me where I needed to be. I knew that that was dangerous. So when I came back home, I called into work, which I often did. Said, hey, I'm not coming in today. I had all intentions of doing something for somebody that would give me enough money to go buy some more liquor. But something told me when I got back home, I said, you don't have to do this forever. And I remember I'd called for help before, but this was like the moment. Like I looked around this tiny little living room that I had in this mobile home. And if I could get the listeners to see this room with me, picture a early 60s single wide trailer in a living room that was probably a 12 by 10. And everything that I owned was in that living room and in that kitchen. So by this time, I had a queen size bed in the living room. That's what I used as my couch, as my place where I slept. I had a fan, an isolating fan, and you can hear that fan. I had a TV sitting on like a table, and I had the bottom of an old military cot. That's what I used for a couch when someone would come over. And so that was like a secondary bed. If somebody crashed there, it was also like a couch. So I had given away everything to support this habit. I mean, even dishes in crock pots. So, I mean, I had to eat out all the time because I had no dishes to put food on. The kitchen table was gone. And there were liquor bottles all around the floor, just empty, that I wouldn't even take the trash out. I was just living in filth. You've seen the TV show Reporters, right? That was it. But I was hoarding my trash, where I just didn't.
Oh yeah, no usable furniture, but just tons of trash.
Yeah. There's tons of trash. And so I remember that morning, I said, okay, I don't want to live like this. I can't kill myself. I can't get drunk enough. I can't get high enough. What can I do? So I was like, I'm going to call for help. And I did. I called for help, and I walked this group called the Watershed in Florida through my whole story, told them everything, said, I told them 15 years worth of addiction. I started using I started drinking when I was around 14 or 15 years old. And which led to all the courage I needed to continue drinking throughout my 20s and up to 30. And I told them everything I had done in my life. And they said, yeah, you're a great candidate. I had to give them my insurance information. They were going to fly me down to Florida and put me in a 30-day treatment program. Well, before I could do that, which I was excited about, I was scared, but I was excited about it. And I had done this on my own, right? I didn't have to wait for somebody to come and do this, but people had already started helping me behind the scenes and I didn't know it. To support my habit, I would cut grass and rob Peter to pay Paul, and I would beg, steal, and borrow. And then one person that I had borrowed $16 from 2 weeks prior to that had turned me into the police department for panhandling, and she wanted her money back. So I had 2 officers show up at my door. I had the mayor of the town and my mother came to this little trailer on this Friday morning after I called for help, after I had drank and after I had used. So we'll say this is by like 10:30 in the morning. And they knew everything that was going on. Us addicts think that we can hide it, but we can't. There's no way to hide it. And so they knew everything that was going on. And the officers put me in handcuffs and they took me to jail for panhandling. My mom and everybody that I did not ever want to see inside of that trailer, because I had covered up the windows with sheets and towels and nobody could see in there except I was the only person in there. But now the light had, the doors had been open and the towels had been pulled back and you could see inside of that room and what they saw is horrible. So that was rock bottom. And from there, I was put in handcuffs and I was taken to jail. I stayed in jail for about 2 weeks and I went before the judge and she said, we know that you called about help. And if you're serious about this, we're going to let you out for 24 hours in the care of your parents. I'm 30 or 31 years old at this time. So I'm a 30-year-old about to go back in my parents' custody. And she said, you have 24 hours to call that place back and start this recovery journey. Well, I called them back. And since I had spent so much time in jail, they considered that detox. And I wasn't an active user then, so they wouldn't accept me. And I said, well, just wait a few minutes. I'm going to go use and I'll call you back. I'll figure out a way around this system. And they said, no, it doesn't work out there. So I called a different place. I called a place called Florida Center for Recovery. I don't even think they're open anymore. And I told them the whole story, kind of what I just told you, but in a lot more detail. And they openly accepted me and they said, we need you to be in Columbia, South Carolina by so-and-so this afternoon, today. We're going to get you on a plane, but we need you to keep drinking because you're going to have detox and you're not going to know how to handle this detox. And so I kept drinking.
If you stop drinking, that's actually very dangerous.
Yeah, I had stopped while I was in jail for 2 weeks, but I was also anxiety, maniac of emotions that, was not a real person during that time. So, and it wasn't like a medicated detox. It was like you just sit in this jail cell by yourself and figure out your life. It wasn't like any kind of help. So, but that was okay. Sometimes that's just what has to happen to people. That's how it happened to me. But they told me to keep drinking. So I did. I picked up a drink. I drank on the way to the airport. I drank when I got to the airport. And on September 27th, I landed in Florida, in West Palm Beach, Florida. It was the middle of the night. Now, I say West Palm Beach like it's some glorious place, but it wasn't for me. It was at nighttime at an airport, and I was picked up. I was met there by someone from this facility. I didn't speak to this person other than hello, and I got in the back of that car, and we went to a treatment facility where I spent the next 35 days hitting the largest reset life button that I could, but I put everything that I had into it because I did not want to go to jail. I couldn't kill myself, so I knew I wanted to live, but I did not want to be in addiction anymore. So I wanted them to teach me what it would take to not live in addiction. And so I started over. And so that was rock bottom. Now I can tell you about these last 15 years, but do you have anything you want to talk about around that part of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from someone that hasn't been in that situation, you could say, well, how could you think that? How could you do that to yourself? Why would you do that to yourself? That kind of stuff. And I know it's useless to ask. I mean, that's so simple. But I mean, what did you feel? Did you just, when you look back on those feelings now, did they seem crazy to you, or does it make sense? Like, when you talk to someone now that says like, they don't want to live, or, yeah, I guess that would be the biggest thing, is like, they don't want to live anymore. What do you say to someone like that?
Yeah. I mean, the people who are in addiction is something that's buried down deep inside. It's something that we don't have control over. It's something that takes over our personalities. It's something that takes over who we are as a person, as someone's child, as someone's husband, as someone's brother. That person goes away, and this new person is who you're stuck with in addiction. One thing I learned in treatment was that and I believe this, and I could be wrong, but I'm just telling you what I believe, is from the time that you start drinking and you turn some kind of a switch on that unleashes this new being of who you're going to become, for me, it was around that 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old, or that age. And that becomes your childlike mindset. So from the time that I was 12, 13, 14, where I was trying to impress the world or fit in or hide some kind of a trauma, I never aged. Now, of course, I aged physically, but temperamentally and decision-making and everything else from that age till 30, that's who I was. A child in addiction, but I was also a grown-up. I know that doesn't sound like real concept, but that's just the way it is. You have this childlike mind, but you also have this new personality that's brought out of you that you can't control. Nobody wants to be an addict. I can promise you that. People are in addiction, but nobody wants to be an addict. They just have no control over it. So what recovery does is it gives you the opportunity to gain control of the person you become and try to fix that. But that's where the I want this comes into play. Like, I want to do this. It's like,
what is like you said, the person you become? I mean, obviously, so if anybody's going to want to like the person that they've become, do they still have to be that person, or can they go back to who they used to be?
Well, you never go back to who you used to be, but you can become somebody better. So it's kind of like I don't know if any of your listeners ever seen the movie Get Out, and it's like where they get put in this trance and they have no control over their body. They're in there. Like, I was in there. The real me was in there. The opportunity of who I could be was in there. But I was so covered up in my addiction that I was never able to show during that time in my addiction who I could really be. It wasn't until after I got sober. So yeah, that person's in there. And people think that, oh, I'm just a social drinker, or there are people that can drink and control it. They're not addicts. They don't have the disease of addiction. And I think that's where scientifically people have now proven that addiction is a disease. And people have to fight it, just like a cancer or just like any other disease. It has to be treated. It has to be worked through, and you have to do the work to become the person you want to be. And it doesn't come overnight. So just because I went to Florida on the 26th of September or landed there on the 27th of September, doesn't mean on the 28th I was a brand new man. It took time. It took a lot of time. It took, I would say, staying inside of that sober mindset for 5 years to actually get a good visual of who you could become, because then you move on from being that childlike mind of a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old. Now you're like a 20-year-old, but you're really 30, but you've grown some. Does that make sense? You've given your spiritual side a chance to grow up a little bit. You've given your brain a chance to flush out all of the junk and these chemicals that you put in your head and in your being to be removed, and kind of grow up some in your thinking and who you are, and you start seeing yourself as a different person. It wasn't until, 10 years in, no, it was more than that. It wasn't until I was 12 or 13 years in that I decided to write a book I wanted to write a book on like my story. Like every addict's got these crazy stories, right? I wanted to put all my stories down and leave some kind of a workbook for people to kind of, go through and, be able to relate to the author and have a workbook that people could go through in small group settings and kind of leave like a lasting impact. And, that idea was shut down because, Richard, I'm Eric Kennedy. I'm not John F. Kennedy. So nobody knows who I am. Nobody's going to buy that book.
You're still one of the Kennedy.
I'm a Kennedy. But, I was challenged by my publicist who became my publicist. We like where you're going with this, but who do you think about when you start your addiction, especially if you're married? Whose life could you change besides yours? And the spouse of someone who's in addiction often gets forgotten about. Their children do too, but their spouse gets forgotten about. And so I wrote a book called Marriage After Addiction, Take Back Your Life Together. And it's written to the supporting spouse of someone in addiction. It helps them understand what addiction is and then to walk in recovery with their person if their marriage is worth saving. Some people burn too many bridges and their marriage isn't worth saving. My first marriage, it didn't make it, but I still wrote this book because there's going to be other spouses out there that deserve the chance for their marriage to make it. And it's done really, really well. There's a lot. That's low-hanging fruit that we didn't know was out there. When we decided to write this book, we did some homework. I couldn't find any kind of a workbook that was written for a supportive spouse of someone in recovery. There's plenty of self-help book. There's an AA Big Book that has a chapter in there to the wives, and there's Al-Anon, but there was nothing.
What happens with the spouse? Like, it's weird. I guess maybe it's not weird, but like, does the communication just slow down and you distance yourself from your spouse, or what typically happens in these addiction scenarios?
Well, your addiction becomes more important than your children and your spouse. So for me, if I'm telling it from my point of view, when I lived in that trailer, nobody else lived with me. I was still married, but we were separated. We've been separated for years. I saw the kids every other weekend, and I was dating other women, and I'm sure she was dating other men, and neither one of us cared, But the addiction took all of that. She was also my drinking buddy and my drug buddy, but I had just went too far, and hers just hadn't caught up with her by then. So when I decided to get clean, I went and lived in a treatment or a transitional housing is what they call it these days, or a sober living house in Lexington, South Carolina. And we tried one more time. We were communicating back and forth, and I lived there for about 3 months, and I said, hey, I'd love to give this a shot. Let's just see if we can make this work for the kids, not for you or not for me, but let's see if we can make it work for the kids. And that's never the right choice. Never do it for your children. People say that and it sounds great, but you have to do it for yourself first, because without you, they're no good. If you're not good,
kids know something's up. They could feel, I'm sure, the tension or you just feel that something's up.
Yeah. Now, luckily enough, my kids were in diapers, and so their memory hadn't really kicked in. I think they knew a little bit of, especially the oldest one who's 18 now. He had an idea what was going on, but not to the extent of it. So, but yeah, me and their mom got back together. We spent about 9 months together. So I was fresh in recovery. 9 months in recovery, and I decided to leave her. I just said, this lifestyle is not the way I want to live. I said, I told you that I wanted to be in my recovery, and she didn't hinder that, but she didn't support that. And that's in that situation. So maybe not that person, but that situation is why I wrote the book, Marriage After Addiction, because those situations happen so often that when you have a spouse that's in addiction and the other spouse, maybe they do want to help out, but they have no idea where to start. They don't understand what addiction is. All they know is that this person has burnt these bridges and they're left with the repercussions. So they don't really care what addiction is, but if they have any kind of forgiveness in their heart, they'll want to do this work. And so this book's written to the supportive spouse, like I said, but it's written for you and your wife to sit down and go through it. It's not very intimidating. It's not a big, thick book. It's larger in size when you hold it, but it's not thick. It's 13 chapters. It can be done in a small group setting. It can be done in the privacy of your home. But at the end of every chapter, there's questions that you answer as the person in recovery. And then there's questions that the supportive spouse answers from their point of view, very practical. And then there's questions you answer together. And it just creates conversation. The first chapter is Help My Spouse as an Addict. The second chapter is based on communication. The third chapter is based on selfishness. Now, they're different names for the chapters, but just so you know the gist of it, one's about playgrounds, playmates, and play habits. You know, you may not have the same friends, you may not go to the same places, and all that needs to change after your addiction. One chapter is about sex, and one chapter is about, you know, saying I'm sorry and it actually matters or means something. One's talking about letting laughter return to your marriage, because if I can make my spouse laugh, it opens up the door to have hard conversations. And then there's 13 chapters, and the first 3 chapters are kind of like the work chapters. The middle 4 through 9 are like your maintenance chapters, and then the last 3 chapters are how you carry the message to someone else. Now, the book is written from a spiritual context, but it's not a religious book, because there's no scriptures in there, and there's nothing in there that throws Jesus at them, and there's a reason behind that. I have a belief in Christ, and I have a relationship with a higher power, but I do talk about my faith in there, and that's the 11th chapter. My story is the 12th chapter, so I did get my autobiography in there, Richard, but it's for 1 chapter, and then I got the last chapter is, you know, how you take this and you help another couple with it. But the reason that I did not want to make it too much of a Christian, it's a believer's book, but when I was fresh in recovery, I didn't want you to, I hate to say this term, I didn't want to be Jesus juke. I couldn't handle too much responsibility. Give me just a few steps to work on at a time, and then let's talk about my relationship with God at a different time. Some people don't get it like that. Some people get God immediately, and this book is still good for them. But what this does is it gives them an opportunity to kind of pick up where they left off at. And when the time is right, they get to that point about faith, and they get told about God in a way that, okay, well, this guy that went through all this, who's trying to help me and my wife, actually has a relationship with God, and I can too. And so it's all about timing. It's all about being patient, and it's all about doing the work. And the book's done very well. I mean, I don't really care about measuring it. I don't care about numbers, but I mean, it's done well in different settings, you know, small group settings.
What are some of the chapters, you know, or concepts in it that people will write to you about, tell you about? You know, any surprises in the feedback you get?
Yeah, we get emails. The biggest chapter that I feel like has stuck out are the very first, or the second and third chapter. So the first chapter is Help My Spouse Fanatic. The second chapter is called Talk to Me. And that chapter is based on communication. Communication is the hardest thing that you have to work on, because in addiction, we fuss and fight, and there's no trust there, and all these things that we have to discuss and get over before we can do this other stuff. That's been the biggest chapter people have talked about or been appreciative to have in the beginning. And then the other one is Finding Rhythm in Recovery. And that's just a different way of saying there's a healthy balance in being a selfish person in recovery. For example, Richard, if you were in addiction, you have to get sober for Richard first. And then understanding from a spiritual concept, it's God, and then your spouse, and then your children. But if you don't finagle, if you look at that pecking order like it's the spinal column, you have to have that spinal fluid, which is your recovery. Richard in recovery has to kind of fall below God and above his wife. The spinal fluid of Richard in recovery has to fall below his wife and above his children. You have to figure out how to be in there. And selfishly, you have to take the lead on this and do it, because without you without you doing the work, it's all going to fail. And so some spouses have written and said, why does that have to be about him, about them, about her, about whatever? It's because it's always been about them. And now we have to give it an opportunity to breathe and let it be about them, but give them the time and the opportunity to show, that they're doing this work for you. And then it's going to be about you for the rest of your life. And so those 2 chapters have been some of the ones that I get letters about or emails about. But it's not been in the context of, I hate this. It's been in the context of these 2 put us in a situation where the questions at the end of the chapter put us in conversations that we never thought we could have. We let our guards down and we walk through it. There's encouragement in there where you write love letters to each other, and even just do basic stuff like that. When was the last time you wrote your wife a love letter where you tell her, the day that you knew that you were in love with her, that one of the things you remember from your wedding day, one of the best moments after your wedding. So
that's a love text.
I try to do that pretty often.
People in addiction don't, though. You're usually asking for forgiveness or, hey, I'm sorry I screwed this up. But it just starts to tear down walls that have been put up when it comes to starting that long road of communication. But
I can see why, as the supporting spouse, because not only are you suffering the abuse and what's going on with them, but then it's also all about them. You're like, oh, what would it be for me? I already suffered this, and now I have to wait. It's still all about them, and then someday it'll come to me.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's worth it. I can tell you it's worth it. Those emails I get are from families that their marriages have been saved, and it's from a wife's point of view, and it's from a husband's point of view. I mean, this addiction does not pick and choose the sex. It does not pick and choose the race, and that's why I think that this book is very needed, because recovery needs to be looked at in a different way. Nobody needs to be defined by their addiction. We need to just talk about it, get it over with, get to the finish line when it comes to the addiction. There's no finish line when it comes to recovery. You get to walk in recovery for the rest of your life. Your finish line is death, and I hate to say it that way, but that's beautiful. It's beautiful. This conversation I'm having with you right now would not be the same if it was me 15 years ago in addiction. By this time of the day, I'd been, drunk, or I would be by myself, where right now I'm waiting on the kids to get home from school, or my wife's in the other room, drinking a cup of coffee. It's just, is life perfect? No, but it's great. And that's what I want to give people. This was given to me freely from an invitation to serve them. And my invitation came from a prayer, which was, what kind of a legacy can I leave to people when I'm not here one day? And so this book, this written word now, is just new ways to view and look and work through recovery.
Any other feedback on the book that was surprising to you, or just that you could feel real good? Any other parts? Just maybe one or two more.
I mean, there's been different things. Like after I wrote the book, I started my own podcast called, the original name of the book was called Recovery Vow. Like, we're in recovery, and a vow we make is the vow we keep. So we make vows ourselves about, I'm going to do this work, I'm going to be in recovery. So that's a vow. We also make vows on our wedding days. And I really like Recovery Vow, but my publicist said there's not enough keywords in there if you're going to be searching for this on like Barnes & Noble or on the internet or whatever. So we went with the name of the book, Marriage After Addiction, Take Back Your Life Together. But I branded the words Recovery Vow, and that's where, the push for the book is under that brand. My podcast, where I share the platform kind of like you do, and just let people come on and tell their stories. So the book is geared toward marriages. The podcast is a platform geared toward any and every kind of recovery you can think of, because every person that's going to listen to this is in some kind of recovery, whether they want to admit it or not. It may not be drugs or alcohol. Maybe it's sexual addiction. Maybe it's phone addiction. Maybe it's in recovery from the loss of someone. Maybe it's in recovery because you don't talk to your parents enough, and you need to say, forgiveness. I had Quentin Aaron on the podcast 2 weeks ago, who played Michael Orr from the movie The Blind Side. And he told his story because he wasn't in addiction, but he grew up poor, and, he's with a single mom, and they had it rough, and then he lost his mom, and he's in recovery from his childhood, but he grew up and he played in a movie. I have Tanner Smith coming on from the TV show Love on the Spectrum. Well, I love Tanner, but I want to hear what his parents have gone through. What kind of recovery they in, because they have to choose, the way that they live their life based on having a child with autism. There's all kinds of recovery out there. And so bringing a new identity to recovery, and people understanding that they can talk about this. So that's what the podcast for, is that platform. We now also have our Recovery Vow Collective, which is our subscription-based platform where people like you and I, we can all go on there. And it's a private group where we do coaching. We can connect you with different counselors. We do one-on-one Zoom calls. So you get FaceTime with me, and I'll be your coach or your counselor, or not your counselor, but your kind of your mentor, or some people call it your sponsor. And I'll just help you walk through steps, but I'll help you walk through the book with your spouse. And if I can't handle it, if it needs to be passed on to more of a professional, our book has clinical backing to where we have mediators that will help do this. The book's been approved to teach to LPCs and counselors, and they get ongoing credit hours for using it. So we've got a network of counselors that use it, and that's where this workshop comes in. We also, I know this is off the cuff, but we also have our own brand of coffee now from a group out of Mooresville, North Carolina, who just believe in recovery. And so they're a roasted. Yeah, a lot of people in recovery, they will say, right, recovery blend. Yeah, it's called Recovery Vow by Divine Coffee, and all income from the coffee goes back to support the mission of Recovery Vow. And it's just really cool to see what's happening. It's just really, really cool, because all these conversations can happen over a cup of coffee. Whether it's you're reading the book together, you can read it and go drink a cup of coffee, or if you're offering this in your office as an LPC, you can offer your client a cup of Recovery Vow coffee. I know it sounds very commercial, but these ideas just didn't fall in my lap. They are anointed ideas and thoughts and processes that give people this new view of recovery without being identified as some brown bag, unemployed loser from the street. I've been there. And people that listen to this, they've been there. Now we get to be men of society, women of society, people of the world that are changing the world because we have a testimony that needs to be heard. And everybody has a testimony. It's just people in recovery, their testimonies seem to be more powerful.
Cool. So the first place for people to start with their interaction with you would be buying the book. And then once they do that, they've gone through it, how do they reach you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me by going to recoveryvow.com. They can go to any of the social media platforms. We're on all the social media platforms. They can sign up for the workshop through the collective by going to www.recoveryvow.com/collective. The coffee is on our Shopify account, recoveryvowcoffee.com. Instagram, Facebook. We just went over, we're only a year old, and so we don't have that many followers. I think we're around 24,000, 25,000 followers. But again, I don't care about numbers. I care about the one couple that'll reach out this week or maybe this month and just says, hey, you're helping. And I get those. And so that's why I keep doing what I'm doing. Now, as a nonprofit, I have to raise money. So, I told you the story in the beginning. I got locked up for panhandling where I went around borrowing money from my habit. Well, now I go around asking for money to support my program. So it's kind of funny, but it is what it is. And we raise money to promote and keep this thing going. It takes an admin team to do this. It takes a marketing team to do this. It takes a production team to do the podcast. And I haven't paid myself. I don't care about that. I have a full-time job. I work for a very large church in Augusta, Georgia, doing project management. And I do this because I just want to change people's lives.
That's great. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and you being brutally honest about your experience and, living your lifestyle to help others. So I appreciate you being here.
Richard, you're very welcome, man. Thanks for allowing me to come and join you. I appreciate it. I really do.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.